Nobody knows what I thought, and Sandra Mills did not remember that prayer. Sandra Mills had just finished washing the breakfast dishes when the front door opened. She didn't think anything of it. People came and went in that house. She'd gotten used to it. The neighbors, the visiting nurses, the occasional pastor from Dorothy's church. After 22 months of living in someone else's home, you stopped startling at the sound of the door. But this time was different. Marcus Hale walked in without knocking. He never knocked anymore, not since he'd gotten the power of attorney paperwork signed 9 months earlier. He walked in like the house already belonged to him, which, Sandra was beginning to suspect, was exactly how he thought of it. Behind him was a woman Sandra didn't recognize. Young, a briefcase, a clipboard. Marcus didn't look at Sandra. He looked at the walls, at the furniture, at the filing cabinet in the corner where Dorothy kept her medical documents. "Where is she?" he said. "She's resting. Her morning therapy wore her out. Marcus, we need to talk, now." In the kitchen, Sandra dried her hands on a dish towel. She followed him, already feeling the cold drop of dread forming somewhere below her ribs. She didn't know yet that by the end of that conversation, she would be out of a job, out of that house, and accused of stealing from a woman she had loved like a mother. Emphasized, she didn't know yet that Marcus had been the one stealing all along. Caregiver introduction. Who was Sandra? Sandra Mills had spent 30 years in healthcare. She'd started as a hospital aide in her 20s, worked her way up to a licensed practical nurse, and spent the better part of 2 decades in a regional medical center before budget cuts wiped out her position at 52. She wasn't bitter about it. Sandra wasn't built for bitterness. But she was realistic. She knew that at 52, with no 4-year nursing degree and a job market that quietly preferred younger applicants, she had limited options. Private caregiving was one of them. She'd done it before, short stints, mostly, a week here, a month there. But when a mutual friend connected her with Dorothy Hale's family in the spring, and Sandra met Dorothy for the first time, something clicked. Dorothy reminded Sandra of her own grandmother. Sharp eyes, quiet humor, a woman who had spent a lifetime being strong for everyone else and wasn't quite sure how to accept help gracefully. The job was harder than Sandra had expected. Dorothy's stroke had left her with limited speech and some paralysis on her left side. The first months were exhausting. Physical therapy schedules, medication management, dietary restrictions, hospital follow-ups, night episodes where Dorothy would wake confused and frightened. Sandra skipped holidays. She missed her nephew's graduation. She turned down a better paying position in January because she didn't want to leave Dorothy mid-recovery. She told herself it was just professional commitment, but the truth was simpler than that. She loved that old woman, and she believed Dorothy was getting better. Dorothy, the woman at the center. Dorothy Hale had been a schoolteacher for 38 years. She was the kind of woman who sent handwritten birthday cards, kept every letter her students ever wrote her, and still hosted Christmas dinner at 79, despite her doctor's gentle suggestions that maybe someone else could take a turn. Her stroke had come without warning. A Tuesday afternoon in April, she was in her kitchen, and then she was on the floor. Her neighbor found her 40 minutes later. She survived, barely. By the time she was discharged from the rehabilitation facility, Dorothy could walk slowly with a cane, understand everything said to her, and communicate, but only in short phrases, and often with frustrating gaps where the right words simply refused to come. Her daughter Renee lived in Phoenix. Her son had passed 3 years earlier. Her closest living relative besides Renee was Marcus, her late brother's son. Marcus had always been the charming one. Funny at family dinners, generous with compliments, quick to offer help. Nobody had looked closely at whether the help ever actually materialized. The POA, trust given too easily. The power of attorney conversation happened 6 weeks after Dorothy came home from rehab. Softly. Renee had flown in for the weekend. She felt guilty. She knew it. Sandra knew it. And Dorothy, in her quiet way, knew it too. Renee worked long hours. She had her own health struggles. She couldn't move to Tennessee, and she couldn't be there every day. Marcus suggested it over dinner. He was smooth about it. He framed it as protection. Someone needed to have legal authority to manage Dorothy's accounts, her insurance, her property taxes, in case she had another episode. "We need someone local," he said. "Someone who can respond fast." "I'm only 20 minutes away. It makes sense." Renee agreed. Dorothy, who trusted Marcus, nodded. The paperwork was drawn up by a lawyer Marcus knew. Sandra wasn't asked for her opinion. She wasn't in the room. But she noticed, that evening, that Dorothy seemed quieter than usual after they left. When Sandra brought her evening medication and sat beside her, Dorothy took her hand and held it for a long moment without saying anything. Dorothy finally said, not a question, a statement. "Of course I'll stay," Sandra told her. She meant every word. She just didn't know yet how hard staying would become. Betrayal, build-up, the quiet theft. For the first few months, nothing seemed obviously wrong. Marcus visited once a week. He was pleasant enough with Sandra, a little dismissive, the way some people are with caregivers, as if the work isn't quite real unless it comes with a title and a corner office. But he wasn't cruel. He brought Dorothy flowers occasionally. He sat with her for an hour. The trouble was, what was happening when Marcus wasn't there? Dorothy's checkbook had moved. Sandra noticed it one afternoon when she was looking for Dorothy's insurance card. The checkbook had been in the same kitchen drawer for 22 months, and now it was gone. She assumed Marcus had taken it for record keeping. Then Dorothy's jewelry box was lighter. Not empty, just lighter. A few pieces Sandra remembered seeing were gone. She told herself Dorothy must have given them to Renee. Then, in February, Dorothy's mood shifted. She became anxious at night. She started asking Sandra whether the bills were being paid. She'd ask about her pension check. Once, haltingly, she said, "Marcus, is he taking?" And then the words stopped coming, and she shook her head in frustration. Sandra gently reported this to Renee in an email. She chose her words carefully. She didn't want to make an accusation she couldn't support. She said only that Dorothy seemed worried about her finances and that it might help if Renee could review the account statements. Renee replied 3 days later. Marcus had assured her everything was fine. The email ended there. Sandra should have pushed harder. She knew it later. But she was an employee. She was not family. And she was already walking a careful line. The breaking point, Sandra is accused. The morning Marcus walked in with the woman from the briefcase, he had already made his decision. "We've reviewed Dorothy's accounts," he said, sitting across from Sandra at the kitchen table as if he were conducting a business meeting. "There are significant discrepancies. Money is missing, a significant amount." Sandra sat very still. "I haven't touched Dorothy's money," she said. "You have access to this house. You have access to her files. You have been here, unsupervised, for almost 2 years. He said it calmly, pleasantly, almost. The woman with the briefcase took notes. "Marcus, I want you to look at me and listen to what I'm saying. I have never taken a single dollar from Dorothy, not one." He looked at her. He didn't flinch. "I think it's best if you gather your things," he said. "The family appreciates your service, but under the circumstances, we can't continue." Sandra stood. She was trembling, not with fear, but with the particular nauseating anger of someone who has been wronged and knows it and cannot yet prove it. She went upstairs. She packed one bag. She went to Dorothy's room and said goodbye. Dorothy grabbed her hand. Her eyes were full, not confused, not frightened, just devastated. "Not you," Dorothy whispered. "Not you." Sandra held herself together until she reached her car. Then she sat in the driveway for 20 minutes and wept. The turning point, the voicemail. Sandra spent 2 weeks in a fog. She applied for jobs. She called a legal aid hotline. She tried to explain the situation to a lawyer friend, who told her gently that without documentation, she had very little to work with. And then, cleaning out her old phone, the one she'd used during the first year with Dorothy, she found something, a voicemail, 14 months old. Dorothy had called her on a Sunday afternoon. Her speech had been clearer then, before the second minor episode in autumn had set her back slightly. In the message, Dorothy said, clearly, in full sentences, "Sandra, I need to tell you something. Marcus called today about my savings. He wants me to sign something else. I'm not sure. I don't trust it. I wrote it down. If anything happens, look in the blue book. I love you, dear." Sandra listened to it 3 times. Then she called the legal aid hotline back. The blue book. Dorothy kept a small blue journal on her nightstand. Sandra had seen it 100 times. She had never opened it. She had never thought to. She contacted Dorothy's longtime attorney, a woman named Patricia Greer, who Sandra had met once during the home healthcare contract signing. Patricia had also noticed something recently. Dorothy's previous will, the one filed with Patricia's firm, had left specific bequests to Sandra and to a local literacy charity. That will had been superseded, 6 months ago, by a new document. Patricia had not drafted the new document. She had serious questions about it. Truth exposed, the bank, and the records. The Adult Protective Services investigation began quietly. Howard Webb, Dorothy's bank manager, had filed an internal concern report in December, 4 months before Sandra was fired. He had noticed a pattern of withdrawals, small enough not to trigger automatic alerts, large enough to add up fast. Multiple transfers to an account he couldn't verify as Dorothy's. He had been waiting for someone to ask. Someone finally asked. Bank records showed 41 transactions over 7 months. The total came to just over $94,000. The destination account was registered to a business entity, a property holding company, that Marcus had quietly incorporated 2 years earlier. The voicemail from Dorothy provided important context. The blue journal, retrieved by Patricia Greer with a signed authorization from Dorothy, contained notes Dorothy had made in her careful schoolteacher's handwriting, dates, names. Things Marcus had asked her to sign, her own uncertainty, written down because she could no longer trust her voice to carry the words. Dorothy had known something was wrong. She just hadn't known how to stop it. The investigation expanded. Marcus's financial records were subpoenaed. His property company's account was frozen. Renee flew in from Phoenix. She sat with Sandra for the first time since the firing. She could barely look at her. "I should have listened to your email," Renee said. Sandra didn't answer right away. There were a lot of things she could have said. Instead, she said, "What matters now is that your mother is protected." Justice. What happened to Marcus? Marcus Hale was arrested on charges of financial elder abuse and fraud by a fiduciary. His power of attorney was immediately revoked. His attorney negotiated a plea agreement. He avoided prison time but was ordered to repay the full $94,000, placed on formal probation, and permanently barred from serving in any fiduciary capacity. His property company was dissolved. His reputation in his professional community, he had worked in real estate, was effectively finished. He issued a written apology. It was 3 paragraphs long. Dorothy's attorney filed it. Dorothy asked Patricia to read it to her once, then set it aside and never asked to hear it again. Renee hired a professional care management company to oversee Dorothy's affairs going forward. An independent elder law attorney was appointed as a financial guardian. Emotional ending, what Sandra got back, softly. 3 months after the investigation concluded, Sandra received a letter. It was from Patricia Greer. Inside was a single page, a formal acknowledgement from Dorothy's estate, signed by Dorothy's own hand, and in shaky but deliberate cursive. Dorothy had instructed Patricia to restore Sandra's name. There was also a separate, immediate disbursement, a personal gift from Dorothy, not contingent on her passing, enough to cover 6 months of Sandra's bills while she rebuilt her career. At the bottom of the letter was a handwritten note from Dorothy. 4 words, "Ask me, I always knew." Always, Sandra folded the letter. She sat at her kitchen table for a long time. She thought about the 2 years, the missed holidays, the night she slept in a recliner chair so she could hear Dorothy if she called out, the morning she drove Dorothy to her first successful speech therapy session and they both cried in a parking lot, laughing at themselves for crying. She thought about what she'd almost lost, not just the job, but her name, her professional reputation, Her sense of herself as someone who could be trusted. It wasn't fully back. It would take time. But it was coming. She thought about Dorothy, still in that house, still working with her therapist, still sending her cards on her birthday, still trusting. And Sandra allowed herself, for the first time in months, to feel something close to peace.